I am particularly thrilled to have two founders building Europe-first hardware solutions for industrial decarbonization, joined here on stage by an experienced growth investor shaping Europe's climate tech scale-up journey. So please shower them with a big round of applause. Susanna Campbell, Claire Murray, and Dr. Anne Lamb. Join me on stage. Beautiful. Love these all-female panels.
Indeed.
Right? Indeed. No, I love it. Thank you, of course, for making time and for being present here for our collaboration forum, because we want to hear from you what keeps you, of course, busy, what keeps you driving forward. And we have Susanna Campbell with us, the chairman and the co-founder of Sire, Swedish, that's the word for oxygen, what she just mentioned. A business-first founder and driving polyester recycling with Sire Forward, which is a textile company, impact company, decarbonizing and de-wasting the industry through textile to textile recycling at hyperscale. That's in a nutshell, but there's so much more to the story. Thank you so much, Susanna, for being here.
Thank you.
We also have Claire Murray with us. Claire, beautiful to have you, of course, here on our stage. You are among many things, you are the co-founding partner at Bloom Equity, bringing in the investor's perspective here on stage, and with 20 years of experience in scaling companies and closing Europe's climate tech growth capital gap. You're very passionate about supporting high-growth companies on the big journey when it comes to sustainability. Claire, we want to hear more about it later. Thank you for being here. Claire.
Thanks.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Anne Lamb. You're the founder and the CEO of Traceless Materials, and you are tackling the problem of plastic pollution through traceless materials and driving the transition to a circular economy forward. You're based in Hamburg, and the goal is very clear: replacing plastics at scale and build a net zero circular materials industry. Thank you for being here. Dr. Anne Lamb. And I'd like to start with you because when we follow your journey, you have started Traceless Materials as a scientist, very determined to fight plastic pollution. So take us to the beginning, where your personal story and your personal journey started from that lab bench, thinking about solutions, now to an entrepreneur and the way forward to Traceless Materials. What was the beginning?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much for having me. So when I look back 6 years ago, and it was my PhD, I was a scientist. I didn't even know that individual people could maybe even found a company. I mean, this was the state of scientific depth I was in, right? I think many of the startups maybe can relate to that sit here, and being so much fascinated by the new process I developed. But then all of a sudden, first customers came to me, approached me by coincidence, by friends who said, "Oh, what do you do actually?" And they really needed this technology. And I was like, maybe I should do something about it. So I really started to get to know about how to found a company, what is a startup, how does it look like. And I found my co-founder who came from the business world. So we both founded the company 5 years ago. And actually in the beginning, of course, you're a small team and you develop the technology, focus on the business model. But then actually at a certain point you realize, I'm a leader. And actually, Respond Accelerator, where I participated 4 years ago, that helped me realizing that, I'm not only a scientist anymore, I'm now also a leader, not only of people, but also a leader of a company. And now that 5 years later, I would say that also transitioned towards a leader in a whole transition. And this is at least what I also want to bring forward, the whole transition towards a circular economy. Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, we scaled from lab scale to now a pilot plant 3 years ago, and now we are opening our big commercial facility, a demo plant, producing our novel biomaterial, where we substitute a couple of thousand tons of plastic next year. Per year for single-use items and packagings. And the journey is not over yet, but we are scaling much faster in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story. What would be an advice to the younger Anne that started at that lab bench?
Well, I think when I think back, I'm like, how could I have thought that this was a good idea to start a startup based on where I was in terms of maturity of the project and of the material? When I still have these samples with which I based the founding of the company on, and I'm like, how could I have the confidence? Because they don't function, they break, they are really not good quality, and I didn't even know how customers could process it. But believe in the intuition, believe in the gut feeling that you see something in it, because the challenges and hurdles that will come, they will always come, and don't overthink the challenges that will come.
Susanna, when you were listening to that flame that started a whole journey at Anna's life, what was that flame or that sparkle that started your journey with Sire, with oxygen in a way?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I call myself a bit of an accidental founder, because I actually have a long career before I was part of founding a company. I was a CEO of a listed private equity company and then set up an impact VC, then worked with some great founders to scale businesses, and that took me to a situation about 4 years ago when I was up at the H&M headquarters in Stockholm, having lunch with a couple of senior people there because they'd seen the other things that I did, and they were sharing their concern on the magnitude of the sustainability challenge that H&M had on hand. And they saw that they had invested in numerous small startups, but they also saw a few years down the line that none of these startups were scaling so that they could, to a meaningful extent, solve the size of H&M's problem. So kind of went from there, and I couldn't let go of that thinking that something needs to be done in textiles, and went back to a couple of other people that I'd worked with before on scaling companies, discussed it with them, and then decided that we needed to have a look at the textile industry and see, is there something that you could scale that could become kind of a global industry and solve a meaningful part of the textile industry's challenge. And that was 4 years ago. And today we ended up setting up Sire together with H&M. H&M is a co-founder of the company. We have many large partners. We raised $100 million last spring for this mission. And we have some great partners and investors on board, a team of 50, half of them based in Stockholm, where we have the headquarters, half in the US, where our proprietary technology is, and now working with Vietnam to hopefully build our first large-scale plant there. So it's been a tremendous journey in 4 years, extremely difficult to both start and to try to scale this, obviously, and we're in the middle of things. So, but we have high ambitions, and this industry certainly needs some solving of gigantic problems.
What keeps you personally going forward, despite the sleepless nights, the headaches, and the problems in the textile sector, because it's not an easy sector.
It's not an easy sector. It's actually a very difficult sector. And there are so many truths that people were saying that, no, in the textile industry, we don't do off-takes because that's just not done. And there are some of those things that you just say, no, but you have to. If you want a solution to happen, you actually need to actively participate in the solving of it. So I think for me, it's definitely, I'm also deeply aware of the climate crisis and spending almost all of my time in different projects on solving that. And the textile industry needs it more than most industries. I do see many large industrials, and I'm hoping some of you here today maybe want to join us in the journey, because we're definitely not done, and we need, basically it's all hands on deck. No one can solve it by themselves, but together we can actually solve quite big problems.
Yeah. Claire, it's beautiful to have your perspective here on stage as well, because I assume that you follow a lot of stories and a lot of visionary stories along the way when it comes to moving from promise to actually reality and then to scaling up further. So what are, from your perspective and the stories that you've heard, what are the hurdles that scale-ups currently face the most?
Yeah, absolutely. And
the big blockages of obstacles, so to say.
And there are a number. So the milestones these two companies have hit is amazing. When we look to invest, we're growth stage investors, so addressing the missing middle scale-up stage of companies, particularly companies that are not yet at profitability. And if you can tell, I'm American, where there is a lot more funding and speed of funding, which we'll talk about later, in the US than there is in Europe, which is why I have focus on European companies and trying to bridge that gap. In terms of the challenges, well, let me flip it on its head. The success is most often not from the brilliant technology that you've created. It's much more from the ability to execute on that. And so when I think about, the first sample you were giving your potential investors or customers, that's not going to be the end goal, but that gets you.
No, continue. It's not for you. It's not a sign.
The end goal will end there. But it's much more starting on that journey. So when we think about scale up, challenges are on talent, geographic expansion. It's on the right funding, both in terms of debt versus equity, timelines, risk appetite, quantums significantly, and it's also about the ability to accelerate and optimize across very complex value chains in multiple ways, so multiple balls in the air at once. I'll give just a quick example. One of our companies, robotics company, doing inspection on and maintenance on wind turbines. That's a company where their growth is very much linked to an increase of working capital. And so how do you fund that? That's great, they're continuing to grow, but is equity the right mechanism for funding working capital? No, you need debt financing, and you need that in terms that are competitive, and you need that in larger quantums than I'm seeing currently in the market.
Mm-hmm. Claire, besides the hard facts and all the details and the numbers and the facts, what kind of personality is needed to scale up? Because we are living in these times of transformation, in these, some call it times of crisis, others call it times of opportunities. So the kind of leadership and the personality that is needed for these times are maybe different than 10 years ago as a founder as well. What do you see as a key element for a successful leadership?
I would say resilience balanced with ambition. So, having that North Star that is global domination, and then the resilience and the creativity to recognize that's not going to be a linear path.
Mm-hmm. And Susanne, would you agree on that? Or what would be a core variable for, the personality of a startup founder?
Yeah, I think the passion behind is the most important. And I think depends, of course, on the field. But if we talk about clean tech or circular business models, then it is definitely also being substantially convinced that this is the future. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, there are easier ways to earn money. So you need the passion and you need the resilience, and you also need to stand up against all these naysayers and all these established old economy voices, I think.
And I that would definitely agree. I think being stubborn is a
good thing in that regard.
So. It's just not giving up. But then something that I am obsessed with is also the ability to build the right team around a company in the case to make sure that you have the actual abilities needed to scale, because it's often quite different capabilities you need when you start a company and you might have a small technology versus what you need when you're actually trying to build something at industrial scale. So being conscious about that and then able to attract the right people is absolutely key, I think.
And in the best case, that team, of course, works in the European ecosystem very well, which brings me to the European ecosystem of being a founder. So, Susanne, I say with you, building Sire, of course, there's this intersection of climate ambition and industrial competitiveness. And of course, in that ecosystem where we are in Europe, maybe you can explain to us what has Europe and the European market in that regard meant to you. It's a place to test, to struggle, to succeed, or to fail in some regards as well. How do you see the European ecosystem?
When we started out, we had very global ambitions, given that we came from a top-down analysis that we need something that we can scale so that we can solve a big problem. And in the beginning, we actually thought that we would go for the European market earlier than we believe now. So we have half the team in Stockholm, half the team in the US, where we have the technology. And then, like I said, the first large-scale plant we're aiming to build is actually in Vietnam. And in spite of that, I would say there are some clear advantages with Europe. I think the partnerships, I was mentioning the $100 million round that we did last spring. There we have some industry. H&M came in with money, Volvo Cars, we have IKEA money through IMAS Foundation. We have, maybe I don't dare say that, Leitmotiv, a VC backed by Volkswagen, if I may say so, and others. The round was led by TPG Rise Climate, so a US investor, also in terms of the risk willingness there. But I would say the help that we get from our European partners, of which some are also on our cap table, is invaluable. However, there are also some severe challenges that we face, because in our industry, cost competitiveness is key, and therefore we need to compete globally. And one thing we have definitely struggled a bit with is that everyone says that, yeah, we want to close the textile loop in Europe because we have so much textile waste that we don't know what to do with. But producing in Europe is more expensive than producing in Asia. And so far, so we have some great customer collaborations, but so far most of our demand is actually in Asia. So the customers that we have said that they want to buy from Asia as a first step. We also want to solve the European textile crisis, I would say, because it needs to be solved, but there are so many kind of bottlenecks, and also there needs to be a preparedness and an awareness that you need to pay for having production in Europe. It is not on the same cost level as Asia today. So definitely the partnership approach is a very European thing, I think, but then we have some severe challenges as well to overcome as Europeans.
And when we talk about scaling up innovation in the European ecosystem, what is something that comes to your mind? And also, of course, where do you see, or differently framed, does Europe feel like home for you as a founder, or rather like a place with a lot of headaches?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we chose also to build our first plant in Europe, in Germany, and we chose also to build the next plant we're already planning in Germany.
Where in Germany? Maybe
in Hamburg.
In Hamburg, okay, yeah. In Hamburg city area. Right.
So for us, for example, energy is not so much of a problem because our process is fully electrified and super low energy intensive. But what of course bothers us, which is on the one hand is a very good opportunity for us, is certain regulation in the EU that drives demand for circularity, for circular products. In our case especially, it's the Single-Use Plastic Directive, it's the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, regulating that fossil-based, virgin fossil-based plastics cannot be so easily used anymore in packaging, for example. I mean, that is a good approach to foster circularity, and this is really needed. And I know how much criticism there is often against EU regulation, but in this case, EU has, or had with the Green Deal and now with the Clean Industrial Deal, still also has a vision, a direction towards circularity and circular economy being a competitive advantage for Europe. So this still stands in the room. And these regulations are really high potential for us that enable us a great market in Europe. So this is why Europe is for us the market to go to. When it now comes to looking ahead 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then it's, I would say, under threat, because on the one hand, we have a lot of omnibus and making regulation more loose, and then we also have an elephant in the room, because in the end, what creates a fast scale-up for us is the market. Market for clean tech industries. That's very easy. So the more the corporates, they want these solutions because of the regulation. But what we need for scaling is offtakes, of course, binding offtakes. And investment or decisions for such offtakes will only be made in a secured regulatory environment. And what's happening at the moment is that it's not so secure if these regulations will hold in the future. So companies like big consumer packaged goods companies who could give us offtakes for like binding offtakes for many years, they are struggling because there's no 100% clear roadmap in Europe. And I think this is a big threat we are under, and I think I share this with all the clean tech industries, because if we are juggling around, yeah, maybe we go in that direction, but let's loosen it. And the elephant in the room is, how can we really mean it seriously with the transition? That also means we need to say no to fossil-based business models. And this is a challenge because the fossil-based business models at the moment also finance us, and how to make the transition, not wanting to keep both up at the same time, because we cannot compete with fossil-based plastics that's subsidized heavily. We will never compete with it. So we need at a certain point to either make them more expensive or give us subsidies. So this is a huge elephant in the room.
Absolutely. Thanks for pointing that out. And I hear that you're asking for clear guidance as well from political side, as I assume.
Yeah, and a long-term vision, a clear long-term vision, and then stick to it.
Thank you. Claire, when we talk about the ecosystem of Europe for innovations, for scaling up, for, from promise to becoming, or from the startup sector to become a global leader in a sector, and you're working with different startup ecosystems on different continents, specifically the US market and of course the European market. What is the biggest difference, and do you see right now a shift? Because of course with the current US administration, there are challenging times and challenging points and question marks, but also of course with this lacking of clear guidance in Europe, there are also some question marks. So, do we see a new movement of startups, or do they rather stick where they are? And is it even a chance for the European startup sector?
Yeah, and I think that's the greatest challenge we have as the European funding ecosystem, is how do you not only facilitate innovation, which is, I think, very clearly there, but how do you keep it remaining in Europe? And I think the U.S. to date has been structurally much better able to finance innovation, both with the speed and the scale. 30% of our portfolio all of our companies are European founded. 30% have switched to U.S. holdcos. And so I think that is indicative of there still being incentives. Also one large market for reasons to move to the U.S. That being said, I am seeing a shift. Like, I do think if you were to ask me next year, that number won't be 30%. I think it'll be lower. And I think it's both push and pull. I think given the U.S. environment, there's a lot more uncertainty. And so because of that, I think you have companies pausing on plans to expand in the U.S. or relocate to the U.S. And I also think there is optimism from a European perspective, touching on what we need is creating EU policy that is harmonized, to use the word before, and simplified. And that really is needed, because if there's clear guidance and incentives out there, people follow the money, and that will certainly drive continued support of the innovation ecosystem.
But in that regard, talking about the clean tech support, I'd like to get away from just talking about the US market or the US finance market and the European market. What are different players that we haven't yet talked about? Maybe Asian players or G20 players coming from India, Sub-Saharan Africa. There's so many, Brazil, there's so many BRICS. There's so many new players in that market, and the whole world is kind of now flowing around. So do you see any new markets, new actors that we should be aware of, because it's a blind spot right now in our debate?
Asia, I mean, both in terms of
China, or which? No,
I'm thinking Korea in particular, Korea, Japan. In terms of financing, a lot of capital is coming out of those markets in particular to finance European companies. Like, we're competing with those players more than I've seen corporates, Asian corporates come up in rounds we're looking at, which I never would have seen before. So I think there's capital flowing from them, and I think there's certainly incentives in terms of where you locate production facilities as well. Yes, I would say those. I don't know if you think.
Yes, Susanne.
No, I would. I agree, but I would definitely mention China. I think from when I started doing impact investing, like 9-10 years ago, versus now. 10 years ago, Europe was clearly in the lead, I would say, in terms of new technologies and developing them. If you look now at what China have actually done in clean tech, it's extremely impressive. And in my line of business, we're looking at building large-scale plants. And the latest statistics I've seen in many industries, China do it at half the capex. And
oh, hang on, we need a first aid. A first aid person, please. Yes, we have a first aid person in the room.
Sure.
You have to lie. Hang on. Give him a clap on the back if he. First aid, please. And if he's not breathing. Is he not breathing? Otherwise, you clap him on the. Okay. Sorry for that. You're good. Yes, we need a first aid, and then we got you out, so you have a moment of breathing. Don't worry. Would you like to get a 5-minute break for you, or you feel comfortable to be in the room? You okay? You need a water or something, or? Okay, you accompany him, and who's a contact person for him if he needs another help, please? Just Michael, just raise your hand. So just raise your hand, Michael, that he knows that you're the main contact person. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah. We just quickly check on the gentleman the gentleman with the tissue, please. Raising up the hand. Yes. Please. Maybe you take a 5-minute or just check on him quickly. I'd like to invite you back with your attention back to me, so we check that quickly, and then we continue, of course, as soon as possible our conversation, but it's good that we have professionals in the room and that we get... Yes, please darken up. Okay. Get better soon, and I hope to see you... No, that's fixed, I think. Somebody... Yes. Okay. Are you okay? Perfect. Do you need a water or something? Okay, perfect. Okay, we are back. Susanna,
yes.
Claire,
yes, just
and Susanna, I'm
okay.
just trying to get. Okay, we were, Claire was mentioning these blind spots.
You were at China,
yes. And then maybe you can also give all of us a glimpse of what the European stakeholders should be aware of, and should they get their heads on it? Because sometimes, we tend to be a bit sleepy, maybe. But where would you say, okay, this is now really a wake-up call? Susanne?
No, I think what I was saying was that I saw some statistics, I think it was from McKinsey, saying that for many large projects, like building factories, the capex in China is about half, and they build in about half the time versus what we do in both Europe and the US. So there the US definitely has the same problem. And I sometimes still hear politicians talk about, here in Europe especially, saying, but it's a level playing field, we're dependent on our exports and so on. But it's not a level playing field also with the tariffs that we see and everything. So I think there is definitely a lesson to be done. And what China are doing is truly impressive in certain areas. And if you look at clean tech especially, they do own certain verticals now, which they did not do just 5-7 years ago. So I think we need to be aware of that and also work together to actually build a strong and resilient industry in Europe. And I think it's only together we can do it, because China have been very good at combining public and private capital, at actually kind of collaborating and competing internally to make this happen. I think we need to step up to that.
Step up to that. And of course that brings up our core topic of collaboration, and you were mentioning that before, that you were also part of the Respond group, and of course the Respond Accelerator. Do besides, of course, the professional connection and collaboration, what human connections helped you then, of course, to scale up and to build up that collaboration that you needed to grow as a founder, but to grow also as a company?
So, I would say 3 points through the accelerator. One is, of course, meeting peers. I think that was most valuable. And I think there's still a very brilliant connection between these peers and, supporting each other. And second one, I would say, grow as a leader, as I said in the beginning, and accompanying me as a young leader. And the third advantage of that program was that I received access not only to the network and to brilliant coaches and mentors and contacts, but also access to stages and
visibility
through being able to speak on panels and keynotes and so on, which I wouldn't have had the access to without Responso.
Well, if you're in need of female founders, here you have them. There's no excuse anymore, right? Claire, the big buzzwords, resilience and collaboration. So bring it together. What is needed for resilient collaborations? You know, what is from your perspective, of course, and with all the stories that you heard, something that we need to work on to shape and to strengthen that collaboration?
I think for startups, scale-ups that are in the industrialization space that require significant capital and longer timelines, the partnership with industry. So we've talked about this on the offtake side, but having strategics, corporates come in to support that, it, as an investor, de-risks that for us because it shows commercial adoption, and it also, but there's a pro and a con to it. So just to make sure one's aware of it, you could also look if you're with one strategic, it can look that you have a captive audience, which from a M&A perspective down the road or from working with other corporates, might have some challenges there. So it's worth deciding when is the right time to bring in those corporates, and is it one versus a number, and that'll depend on each company. But I think what we need to do more from a collaborative perspective is bring in the industry to the conversation and to the capital.
Wonderful. And with that being said, I take that as a closing word. Thank you so much to Susanna Campbell, to Anne Lamb, and Claire Murray. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.